My greetings to all. Today's tutorial is a continuation of our previous tutorial. We are still dealing with the agreement between auxiliary and main verbs. Now, let me remind you of something. If you remember, we said that in a previous tutorial, we have two types of verbs, the helping verbs, which are in this case, the verb to be, the verb to have, the verb to do, and the models. And we have main verbs, which come in the following forms: the base form or the infinitive, verb 1, present participle or base ing, verb 2 or past simple, and verb 3 or past participle. Now, what we're going to deal with today is actually a very important issue in English. I'm going to show you how the auxiliary verbs and the main verbs are joined together, and how main verbs are used on their own in the two tenses, the present simple and the past simple. Let's start with the following. Now, when using verbs on their own, or when joining the auxiliary verbs, the main verbs, we get the main forms of tenses in English. By the way, this has to do with a very important concept in English. All sentences in English, now we're becoming more serious actually. In this tutorial and the tutorials that are going to be coming on, we're going to be more serious in discussion. The previous tutorials were basically a foundation tutorials, but now we are dealing more in depth. Now, sentences English have two main forms. Two main forms, not 3 or 4, only two main forms. Sentences either come as one verb sentences that contain only one verb, and in this case, we only refer to the present simple or the past simple. And in this case, all verbs are used independently, and they are used as main verbs without other verbs. Okay? So again, sentences in English are either one verb sentences, either present simple or past simple, and the other 10 tenses in which, there are going to be two or more verbs in a sentence, two or 3 or even 4 verbs in a sentence. So again, let me just say that again. Sentences in English are of two major types. Either one verb sentence or two and more verb sentences, 2 or 3 or 4. Okay, now the verbs can either be main verbs or auxiliary, which are used as main verbs, as if you remember we dealt with this actually in the previous tutorial, or they could be used as auxiliary verbs, okay, as you are going to see later on. Going back. Now, sentences which contain only one verb are either present simple or past simple, okay? Now, going to the pronouns he, she, and it with the present simple, or the boy as singular, you remember that the verb should end with an S or ES, that's verb 1, works, goes. And if we are referring to the verb, the helping verbs, the verb to be, the verb to have, the verb to do, and models, actually not the models. In this case, we are using these verbs as main verbs, the only verbs in the sentence. We are using them independently. If you remember, we have taken examples of these sentences in our previous tutorial. So my advice to you is to go back and watch the tutorial again. Now, with regard to the pronouns they, we, you, and I, or the boys, and in this example, we are referring to it as plural, the verb comes as is, with no addition, like as if it is infinitive, like work and go, and the other helping verbs are verb to be, have, and do. Now, with regard to the past simple, again, all pronouns and nouns, don't forget that past simple verbs, verb to, can either be regular or irregular. Okay, now, regular or irregular. Regular verbs end with an ed or d, like worked, heard, and irregular, we change the whole verb from base, like go to went, sleep to slept. And the other helping verbs which are used as independent main verbs was, were, had, and did, the verb to be, and the verb to have, and the verb to do. These are main verbs. These are main verbs, not auxiliary verbs, because they are used in the present simple and the past simple. Now, about the 2 or more verb sentences, we have 10 more tenses. The auxiliary verbs are used as auxiliary, as helping verbs, and they are used with other verbs. Starting with the model, the future simple. All pronouns and nouns take modal verb. In this case, I have used will, plus the infinitive or the base form, will work and will go. Now, the present continuous. Is, are, am, plus verb ing depends on the pronouns used. He, she, and it take is, working, going. They, we, and you are working or going. I am working or going. Now, the past continuous was, aware, plus verb ing, okay? Again, depending on the pronouns. He, she, and it, followed by was, working, or was going. They, we, and you were working or going. And finally, I was working or going. Now, the future continuous, again, I'm going to take one example from the modal verbs. In this case, I've taken will, followed by the verb to be, plus base ing. And let me remind you of something. The verb to be here should stay as it is, not like is, are, am, was, or were. So that's why we say will be, not will is, or will are, or will was, or will were. You can't say that. Working or going. Now the present perfect, okay? Again, present perfect, depending on the verb. It's has or have plus past participle. He or she or it has worked, has gone. They, we, and you have worked or gone. I have worked and gone. Now the past perfects had plus verb 3, and there is no reference to any, or difference actually, between nouns or pronouns. So all nouns and pronouns are used with had plus verb 3. Now future perfect, again, all nouns and pronouns are used with will plus have plus verb 3. Again, let me remind you of something. Have in this case is used as have and not changed into either has, have, or had. Present perfect continuous, again, depending on the pronoun, it's has or have plus been plus base ing. So he, she, and it has been plus verb ing, working, going. They, we, and you have been working or going, and I have been working or going. Now the past perfect continuous, again, no difference between any nouns or pronouns. They all take had plus been plus verb ing, had been working or going. Finally, future perfect continuous, again, I'm going to take an example as well from the modal verbs, followed by have plus been plus ing. As you can see, will have been working or going. So this was our final tense. Now, by the way, I'm not teaching tenses at this stage. I'm just showing you the combination of auxiliary and main verbs. And by the way, this is the stage in which not so many students deal with, actually. They all go into studying tenses immediately and they find it difficult. Why? Because simply they cannot form simple sentences and they cannot actually distinguish between auxiliary main verbs and auxiliary verbs as main verbs. So we still have 2 more tutorials on auxiliary and main verbs and the combination and the type of sentences in English. That's what we have discussed earlier, 1 verb sentences or 2 or more verb sentences. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you very much.